It was a tough day at the office. I'll never forget the day as long as I live. It was January 4th, 1999. I woke up in the morning and half of my body had gone numb overnight, literally. The doctors feared the worst and they tested me for stroke, multiple sclerosis, Lyme's disease, lupus, and even brain cancer. I remember being in the hospital, being wheeled down the hallway to have a brain biopsy done, where they would screw me into a halo device, my scalp cut open, 3 holes drilled in my skull, a saw would remove a triangular piece of bone, then they would take pieces of my brain to study, and they told me they wanted to do it while I was awake, so they wouldn't remove a place that I really needed the brain tissue. So while I'm being wheeled down, I hear the phone pager system at the hospital call my name. I answered the page. The doctor on the other end said, "We're a teaching hospital. We change teams the first day of every month. Today's March 1st. I'm your new doctor, and I don't think you should have this procedure done." I said, "Well, what do I do?" And he said, "Go to the desk, ask for a scissors, cut off the wrist bracelet, and go home." I did, and you should have seen the nurse chase me down the hallway all the way back. But following 4 spinal taps and multiple tests and brain MRIs over those 3 months, they realized that they had misread my very first test that proved that I indeed did have multiple sclerosis. And MS is a disease that affects the spinal cord and the brain, causing scarring on them. And for me, those areas of my brain that have the scars, sometimes it causes vision loss or numbness and tingling or mobility issues. When I heard those 2 little letters, I panicked. I ran away from everyone and everything, and I left a 22-year marriage. I quit my 20-year teaching career. I sold my house, I left my family and my community, and I moved away because I wanted to do everything I could while I still had good use of my legs. It wasn't until I left, though, that I really found me again, and mountain climbing helped me do that. So what began as my father's dream to climb a mountain became this goal that I would strive for much of my adult life. And my goal was to climb the highest peak on each of the 7 continents. But that goal really intensified in 1999 when I was diagnosed with the MS. But it really started back when I was in high school. I was in the kitchen with my dad, and he said, "Someday I want to go to Africa and climb Mount Kilimanjaro." And I love my dad dearly. He's always been athletic, he's a runner. And I said, "Someday I'll go with you." 20 years later, we met in Africa, and we reached the summit on my dad's 61st birthday. So 6 years later, and just 10 months after that diagnosis of MS, I headed to South America to climb the highest peak there. And I got to the summit on the millennium, New Year's Eve, 99, 2000, and I was one of only 14 people to reach the top that day. And I thought to myself, you know, girl, if you're strong enough to climb a nearly 23,000-foot peak, you're strong enough to accept the fact that you have MS and start to live your life again. So that day really changed my future. So over the next few years, I began to kind of run at a frenzied pace, climbing everything I could while I still had really good control of my legs. So I went to climb Europe's highest peak, Mount Elbrus, and then a couple years later, I continued on to Denali. And on Denali, I was experiencing a lot of back pain because you had to carry 60 pounds in your backpack. That was the one I carried. And I had to drag 60 more pounds in a sled behind me for a month. When I finished, I went to the doctor. I said, "I got a lot of back pain." They realized, he said, "Yeah, right." But stupid, brain damage too. But he said that I had a pinched nerve on the lower discs, and they would need to do surgery. When they got in there, they realized that one of the spinal taps years before had missed and caused a slow leak of spinal fluid that caused a blister on the nerve. And every time I walked with the pack, it was being crushed. So they did surgery, removed some of the bone. I rehabbed for about a year and thought it was time to finish up. So from there, I went to do 3 in a year. I went to Kosciuszko in Australia. And from there, I continued on to the Vincent Massif in Antarctica. And this was really my training ground for Everest. We made our first attempt to go up to the summit. It was 45 below zero, 45-mile-an-hour winds. We got to within 200 vertical feet of the summit, and the call was made it was too dangerous and too deadly, and we had to go back down. So the next day, after another 10 hours of climbing, we reached the summit. So from there, a few months later, I headed to Everest to climb the world's highest peak at 29,035 feet. And that climb took 2 months to reach the summit. Mount Everest journal entry, March 29, 2009. Why Everest? For 20 years, I taught elementary and special education in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. My goal as a teacher was to help children believe in themselves and not be afraid to try. Now it's my turn to learn that very lesson. In attempting a goal as lofty as Everest, I give myself permission to try. I have to believe in myself in order to live my dreams. Sure, I might not always succeed at what I attempt, but there's no failure in that. The success is in the journey. It's always in the journey. So after 2 weeks of hiking, we got to Everest Base Camp, and now we were really switching from hikers to climbers as we practiced and reviewed climbing with our climbing gear and our ropes. And I remember saying to myself, what's a small town girl from Wisconsin doing in the world of mountain climbing anyway? Because I had no sponsors. I had no formal mountaineering training. I read about it in books so that I could learn how to do it. And I had no way to repay the huge loan that I took to do that climb. And I thought, am I crazy? But I think I was just a girl trying to live a dream. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with going for what you want in life and following your dreams. Mount Everest journal entry, May 20th, overcoming fear. 9 grueling hours up the Lhotse face, and we're at 23,500 feet, Camp 3. The incredibly steep 40 to 60% incline and thin air causes us to take 1 step, then 7 breaths. 1 step, then 7 breaths. It's the kind of thing nightmares are made of. There are many things in my life that once scared me. Being alone, having MS, being broke, or attempting things I was uncertain of. Now, at 52, I'm all those things at once. I'm here on this mountaintop in Nepal with no family to comfort me, $80,000 in the hole, hanging off the side of a wall made of ice, asking myself, am I afraid? Oddly, the answer's no. I trust that this is where I'm meant to be, and I'm feeling at peace. I'm here to learn about overcoming fear and about trusting my instincts. Mount Everest journal entry, May 21st. In climbing Everest, I'm learning to conquer my fear of failure. I've overcome my ideas of what limits me in my life, and I've learned that if I believe, I can achieve. I took a leap of faith in even attempting this mountain, and that was the first of many little steps that will carry me all the way to the summit of Mount Everest, and those in my life as well. It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves, said Sir Edmund Hillary. So summit day arrives, and for many years, I feel like I've been climbing the mountains and the obstacles in my life, but we all have mountains and obstacles. Mine happens to be called MS. Yours might be called high blood pressure, or diabetes, or weight issues, or cancer, financial, relationship issues. We've all got our mountains, and we have to approach them one step at a time and keep going in order to live our dreams. So now the time had come for me to just look past my perceived limitations and my perceived disabilities and climb beyond those and look at my real abilities. This is our summit attempt on Everest. So 5 oxygen tanks later, I reached the top of Mount Everest at 8:39 a.m. Nepal time after 10 hours and 39 minutes up and 6 hours back down, and I became the first person with MS to summit Mount Everest and complete the 7 summits. But I'm one of the really lucky ones with MS because I have my mobility still. And it was such an honor for me to carry the hopes and the dreams of all of us that have MS all the way to the summit. And, people ask me, what was it like to be on top of the world? For those 10 surreal minutes that I was up there, couldn't see a thing. Those clouds that you saw down in the valley, they came up and it was whiteout conditions by the time we got to the top. So after 16 years of climbing and dreaming about it, I couldn't see the top of the world. But when I was up there, all I could do was to look inside. And what I saw was this person who was no longer afraid. From that terrifying day that I woke up with half my body numb, I wasn't afraid to live my life passionately anymore. And I wasn't afraid to take a leap of faith and try something that honestly once would have just scared me to death. And I saw a person with hope for the future. Mount Everest journal entry, final entry, reinventing my life. Daughter, wife, teacher, ex-wife, ex-teacher, mountain climber. As I reflect over the past 2 months, many times I feel small and insignificant in my world. Who would have thought as a little girl growing up playing with dolls that my life would have progressed to where I am now? As I have moved through the ages and stages in my life, I felt the pain and pleasure of each of my 52 years. I'm soft, tender, feminine, yet wonderfully tough. I have reinvented my life over these past 10 years, and I've gone from teaching young children to be brave and trusting themselves to teaching myself this very lesson. Through these experiences in my life, I've begun to teach others as well. My lessons: live your dreams one step at a time. Trust, take a leap of faith, be brave, dream big, really big, and believe in the unbelievable. Climb beyond your limits, because now it's your turn. And don't let fear in. Just breathe, breathe, breathe. Thank you.